Excuse me, wow, we are in stereo sound. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, June 9th, 2022 meeting of the Town North Andover Community Preservation Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted via in-person and via remote means. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in the public meeting, please email your questions or comments prior to or during the meeting to dbeckley@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be provided to the committee before the meeting or read during the proceedings if received during or shortly before the meeting. Thank you all. We are joined here in person with Dan Beckley and John Simons remote. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll go ahead and get rolling. First up, the financial report from last month. I don't know if everyone had a chance to take a look at that. It is in the meeting packet. I don't have anything specific to bring up on this unless anyone else saw anything they want to address. Nope, hearing none. Great. We had on here update on our project signage strategy, which unfortunately Jack is not in attendance tonight to give us an update on that. And Rick, you made a quick mention you'd passed along some of your stuff.
Yes, I forwarded Jack all the information I have from Dawn Sign Tech and the sign designs and proofs. So
Okay.
He's got all the information. We did talk briefly about some signs for the fields, and that was about it.
Okay.
He was going to take a look at the.
Okay, great. Well, we'll circle back up with him and figure out what the next steps are. Expect it to be a process over the next several months as we get these things up and running. So, next up on the agenda, grant agreements and materials. Dan, maybe you want to address kind of what's in everyone's meeting packet. I think most of us had a chance to review it, but if you could give us a quick synopsis of what's in there.
Sure thing. So for the grant
Dan, you're on mute. You're not on mute. Okay, well, we're not hearing you.
Did you have him earlier?
We had John. I don't know that we had Dan.
Yeah. Anything? No?
I can hear Dan. Should I be a ventriloquist?
Now I can't hear either one of them. Oh, I hear John.
Okay.
Dan,
Can
you want
you
to
hear
try?
me?
I can hear you, Dan. Yep.
Great. Okay. So in the meeting packet, there's a folder for grant materials. Let's start with the grant agreement template. That largely hasn't changed. Per request of the accountant, some specifics about the disbursement and reimbursement process. So under expense accounting, which is item number 5 on the grant agreement template, it had originally read, recipient shall submit to the CPC staff a fund disbursement form along with any invoices, receipts, and evidence of completion of the associated work. To that, I added reimbursement requests should include copies of the checks made out to project vendors, in addition to the aforementioned materials, which included in the disbursement request. We had been, some people had not been submitting the copies of checks when they were requesting reimbursement, and it led to confusion about whether they were requesting a reimbursement or a disbursement. And so just had to make that a little bit more specific. And because we had been receiving a few requests for disbursement after the invoice was due to the vendor, I had also added, to the greatest extent possible, recipient shall submit requests for direct payment to vendors in a timely manner to CPC staff. Nothing, mostly just re-emphasizing things that are established already. To quarterly reports, which is item 6 on the template, I added quarterly reports shall be completed using the appropriate quarterly reports template provided by CPC staff. Anticipated delays to project completion shall be noted in quarterly reports as delays are made apparent to the recipient. Those are the only changes to the generic template that were made.
Okay. Let's stop you there for a second. Anybody have any questions for Dan on either of those items? Okay, great.
All right. Guess I could be sharing my screen. I'm actually going to do that. Okay. I added some conditional language to the grant agreement for the boat launch. So all that read is the stuff I had just read aloud. Under special conditions, which is item 8, and we can discuss and revise this, I had added funds for this project shall be used for the design of improvements to the North Pump Station boat launch that abide by the town of North Andover's lake usage regulations adopted by the Select Board. The design resulting from this project shall prohibit and effectively prevent access to the lake water by trailers or other vehicles. The grant recipient and project team shall seek input from lake stakeholders during the design process to aid in the development of lake access designs that provide sufficient protection to the drinking water.
Okay. All right, I'll stop you there for a second. Anyone have any questions regarding that language in particular? Obviously, this is a much talked about application, so it seems to me to capture.
I'm glad that's in there, both the prohibition and the collaboration. So I think that's good.
Great. I think that covers everything that we stipulated in the Warren article, if I recall. So great. Okay. Great, Dan.
And this one I wasn't as sure about. We had. It had come up, there was concerns from an abutter about the cross-country trails being close to their house. And I think it was at one point mentioned that there could be conditions on the grant agreement, but I don't know that that was really a concrete stance that the committee had. But in case, I just drafted up a special condition for that grant agreement, which we don't have to include. Again, we can discuss. But it reads, the grant recipient and project team shall communicate with concerned abutting property owners about the route and design of the trail prior to its construction in order to understand and address reasonable concerns of the abutters. The resulting cross-country trail should follow a route that mitigates potential impacts to abutters where practicable. So in general, it seemed like the trail wasn't going to be that impactful to the abutter. But there were still concerns, and I think at least the committee had wanted them to talk through it a little bit. But I didn't get the sense that there was a desire to put any particular restrictions on the trail. But again,
yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I just think it sounds a little stricter. Like, I read this with kind of like a lawyer's contract view on, and I say,
As you
like,
should.
shall and should, I think, like, certainly we're all in agreement that they should consult, should work with the abutter. I think,
We're working with them every week.
so
Yeah.
so I think, like, the grant recipient shall communicate with the abutter and work to find a mutually agreeable solution. I think that would do enough to say we're trying to get to something that works. But I think if we go a little bit too much towards the shall, should.
Yeah, it is a legal document, right? This does become enforceable for us at the end of the day. So, good, Tim?
I share the abutter's concern when he spoke, but I don't recall this committee discussing any kind of conditions or discussing any further than listening to the abutter. And that was it. So I don't know where this came from relative to the committee. I mean, we want to put it in, that's fine, but I'd rather not.
Sure.
We're in ongoing meetings with him. He's on board on everything. We're all fine.
Yeah.
So there's no issues here. So it's almost like I don't want to create one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick, you agree?
I agree with that.
Okay.
I don't think we really talk about any special conditions on that.
We
We listen to the abutters concern.
right.
I believe, isn't his home potentially like over 100 feet away from the trailers?
It is. I mean, he is the biggest abutter to it, as he laid
Obviously,
out.
we need to be sensitive to him.
Right, and I went back and looked in the minutes and rewatched the meeting just to make sure that we didn't specifically state anything, and we did not as a committee at the time that we were approving this one, or frankly the FONAT one as well for the bridges. We did not stipulate any special conditions on that, other than to make the comment that we know both recipients are good neighbors just in and of how they operate, and that discussions were already taking place. So.
We were actually in a conversation with him yesterday. He wants to continue to pay to have the area mowed so that we don't have to mow it.
Out in front.
So, I mean, we're good.
Well, that's a separate discussion, I guess, separate to this
Well,
project.
it's
but
not
yeah.
even ours. It goes to, I sent them to conservation. I said,
Yeah.
you guys, they have to deal with that. We
Right,
don't.
right. So from what I'm hearing here, was the sentiment would be to not stipulate any special conditions on this unless someone wants to make a motion on that fact, otherwise. Okay, all right. Okay, excellent.
And
Go ahead, Dan.
sorry, this one doesn't have to be discussed at all, but the last thing in the packet here is just another document I put together that identifies all the important documents that any grant recipient should be aware of. So just outlining in more detail than is provided in other documents, the grant agreement, how the disbursement forms work, the quarterly project reports, and the project signage guide. So
Okay.
nothing special, just another thing I'm going to provide to all the grant recipients.
Okay.
But that is it for that portion of the packet.
Where are we with the other grants from the other projects that were approved at town meeting? Whether it's FONAT or Johnson Cottage?
So those will all they'll all sign the standard grant agreement. I haven't sent it to any of them yet because the funds aren't available until the next fiscal year, and two,
Okay.
I wanted to run it by all of you first.
Okay.
But I don't recall discussing any special conditions for any of those. But if I should put something together that's unique to any of those, I can certainly do that.
The only thing that would stand out to me would be the historic preservation restriction on Johnson Cottage, making sure that works its way into it, so.
Yep. Okay.
So who reviews, you review these before they're signed?
Yes. I review them with town council. I think this was one of the things we discussed back in the fall, was giving the committee an opportunity to review these things as well before they get signed, so.
I see your chop on it, so that's comforting.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure we're not missing any others, but I don't believe that we are, if it's a standard template agreement. So that's the only other thing, which I think should be a non-controversial historic preservation restriction on that document for the Johnson Cottage, which that'll end up being memorialized in a separate document, separate to the grant agreement anyway, which we'll need to see, which we don't always get to see and review. Just, and this is part of our discussion from the fall which we'll get into a little bit later tonight, we're not always going to have the opportunity to review every single document and approve it in advance. Just the process doesn't work. So, is there anything else I'm forgetting from our grants this year that would require anything?
Well, the only thing that comes to mind, and we didn't grant them any money, but we did vote on approving taking that lot next to the church.
Academy
And
Road?
but one of our stipulations was that we would take it if we could get access. I don't know if that goes in one of our grants, or is that on that? Is it written?
Yeah, so that the way that was addressed when that question came up at our last meeting is that public access is already in the conservation restriction legally. So, and I think And again, our vote was advisory to town meeting, it was not binding
No,
in
I
that sense, so.
understood, yeah, wow.
But I think the warrant article did specify public access as a part of it.
And I think there's gonna be a gate.
Yeah, I think I don't have an update from town manager right now as to where that project stands
That's how
specifically,
I
so.
recall it, was there's going to be a gate for public access, and if at some point, if it's not used, it'll be closed up again. But
Yeah.
I believe there will be an opening.
Yeah, but that was, I mean, obviously it was a prime focus of this committee, and that is the focus of the town manager as well, so. Well, but since we're not issuing any kind of grant agreement or anything like that, we were more or less, I guess, affirming our position
Right.
on that one, so. Okay. But nothing else from the grants that I can recall for this year. All right, excellent. So next up on our agenda is I wanted to review kind of our overall application and funding process, almost do a little bit of a postmortem from how it worked this year. I think we had obviously a really great turnout in the fall, and we got, even though it seemed to yield a lot less in dollars out the door this year, it was a light funding year due to the projects that came in. Specifically, I wanted to talk kind of about the end of the year process and kind of how that came together and what we did and what we talked about and what was ended up being presented to other committees. And make sure that the committee is comfortable with how that process worked, and if there's any changes that you'd like to make for next year, that we're aware of it and prepared for it. I think our timeline gets incredibly truncated between February and May of getting everything ready to go. And it's really in that March timeframe where we had our final meeting approving everything, and then I went ahead and put together the presentations to the Select Board and Finance Committee. And what that doesn't afford is this committee an opportunity to review that presentation in advance. And I know a couple members have expressed concern to me about that process, especially since some of that does end up making it into the exhibit in the warrant article, if not in the article itself. So just so everyone can understand kind of what my process was for putting that together was, I think, pretty straightforward in terms of outlining the applications and how we got to what votes we got to. And I review all the meetings, I rewatch all the meetings, they're televised, and I try my best to summarize the discussion and provide kind of a flavor for items that were either raised by committee members or were not in those key discussion points. I think some could be perceived to be tilting the discussion in a different way or not, and that's certainly not my intent. But if there's a better process that folks want to talk about in terms of how we present a unified position to the other committees, the other boards, and that everyone feels like they had a say and that we're really representing the right flavor of the committee, I'm open to suggestions for change. This year was pretty difficult going from our Thursday meeting to a Monday Select Board presentation and having just a few days without us having the opportunity. So I guess I'm kind of throwing that out on the table for folks to offer opinions, because I want everyone to feel like it's an inclusive process.
No, I mean, I think the toughest part is just getting the applications in the door, right? Like, so how do you get people to get to the door? Because I think everybody that comes in front of us early enough on gets some good guidance, then they revise things. Then it's actually pretty smooth. I think it's like, it's kind of having, do we change the process a little bit to have like two gates? Like there's a fall gate where we're going to accept projects for consideration, and there's a, February gate where we're going to, decide if we're cutting checks or if we're, or not, right? Like, because we always get a couple every year where you're kind of like, you get a bunch of good projects that are pretty well vetted, and you'll get a couple of head scratchers where you're like, we just can't deal with this in this period of time. So, I mean, I think that could help.
Almost like,
'Cause that would
like a pre-application process, or something we
or like a stage one
Yeah,
application process, and then, and like our, the people who come regularly, the Historical Society, other people, you can be like, hey, you're good. We'll see you in February,
Right.
If we have, we'll look, if we have any questions, we'll give you a call. But like people who are coming with a brand new project who aren't, like the boat ramp was a good example, right? Like it took a long time. It's complicated, all that stuff, so I just think that, but it's hard because we don't control when they come with the applications. We only do that by the deadline, you know?
Right.
And are we gonna lose a bunch of people because we say, like, maybe we have a December 1 deadline, and we use the December meetings to get the people in, and, you know, December 1 is your stage 1, you know, sort of thing, and then in December, we decide, okay, these are the projects we're gonna look at in February, and then people have essentially January to get their ducks in a row and come back
And refine their
and
process.
refine it, you know, would that sort of help? And then, you know, and there are a bunch of people every year who you just say, like, hey, you just got to wait for the next fiscal year, because, you know, if you have to do any design, or, you know, it's going to take that long anyway.
Right.
Or do we just move the whole deadline back to,
You got to give,
You know.
I think the short time frame between the time we had voted on the projects and your presentations was, I'll give you, I was surprised pleasantly, though, by the product in the town warrant. I think that was new this year, right? Because I typically read cover to cover the town warrant and all the details as far as there
I
was
think
a
it's
section
similar
up
to
front.
last year, but yeah.
The section up front,
Yeah.
and I guess I missed it last year.
I think they put it as a separate attachment. It was not in the actual warrant.
Okay.
So, yeah.
No wonder.
It's, yeah.
It's missing. But I didn't realize that was one of the products. Very good. But you need a little more time. So you got to roll this stuff back a little bit,
Quick
at least a
turnaround
week.
and a burden.
Well, and again, it's largely templated, and it's not that much
But it does
work.
put more pressure on you, because we don't, as a board, get to really review it as a board.
That's
to-
my-
to
Yes.
really
That's my
agree.
biggest
It's written.
concern is do I somehow get something wrong in there? And it's
Yeah, and I'm not,
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you did an excellent job,
No.
but there is that possibility that someone may have a differing opinion that may not reflect in how you, or whoever the chair is, in their presentation.
right. So would it be better in future years to actually have a draft that template document up, and at the time that we vote, we all also vote, these are the items that we want to communicate to these other boards
Yes.
at the same
I
time?
would think so.
Yes. As long as I hate long meetings, I'd rather have that done right. You know.
And again, if it releases the chair of that extra weight of making sure that you got it right.
You still got to put it out.
No. But it's easy when you don't have to think about it at that point, because we've already made the decision. So I'd
Well,
rather the committee feel
It's a
okay.
unified opinion,
Exactly right.
unified representation.
Yeah. Okay.
I like Bill's point. See, I think the first year it might be a little tough for everybody, but once people know the timeline, I think we're okay. I mean, it's just the first year of a timeline sometimes can mess people up. But once they're beyond that, then it gives everybody a comfortable time, because it shouldn't be a jam session for you either, you know. I
Or
mean,
us,
I think-
frankly. We have to have 2 separate meetings in March just to kind of get through all of the documents. So I think that's as much on us, and especially when you have something like the boat ramp, right, where there's a lot of back and forth, and we want to make sure that we're giving the applicant time, and then we're getting time to review, what comes back to us. I think it's a little bit tough.
So do we look at?
Having not been an applicant, I don't know if it's unreasonable to pull it forward or not. I mean, you have holidays, you get everything else that comes along with it. So,
Well, if you really know you're gonna go for funding, you probably have enough time to prepare. Or at least if you're serious about getting funding, you probably should have enough time to pull it together. So do we look at moving the entire deadline back?
well, what if we did something like this? What if we asked applicants to at least file with us a notice of intent to file, right? Give us a formal written heads up by our December meeting, maybe. And that, give us a quick project summary. You don't have to have all your estimates. You don't have to have all your, you don't have to have all of that, but tell us in broad strokes, this is what we're looking to do. This is roughly what we think we're going to be asking for, that we can then give them feedback relatively fast. You get it to us by our December meeting. We can discuss it, get back to you with immediate feedback so that you're ready with a better application. Maybe that is a better process. And it doesn't, I don't think it would preclude anyone from still making the traditional deadline. Like, when Ridgewood has to come for us,
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be great for us to know what we're going to be getting, but maybe we don't make it a requirement.
Yeah, because the people who know they could probably do that in 5 minutes
Yeah.
in November. And the people who don't know, they'll spend a couple hours, they'll put something together, and then they can come in December or January and have some guidance over, like, hey, or, even say, like, hey, look at examples. Here's a project that looks like yours that we approved years ago. Look at the template, see the level of detail, have any questions, come back to us.
Right.
Because if you have no idea by the beginning of December that you're gonna be putting in you're probably not gonna make it, you're not gonna be ready for it anyway.
I asked the gentleman on the board, and I mentioned Tracy as well, if she was on, but you feel more than I do the pulse of the town. And how much do you feel, or how do you feel that the CPC money, the availability and its purposes, and I know you had a presentation, 5 years ago, 4 years ago? Do you think that is well publicized or well known by people back in October and September, or so that they can start thinking along the lines of getting that notice of intent in December? By the way, I think that's a great idea. I just get the sense, like, I don't know who mentioned it, it's the same old people who come in for money. And, at this stage, we're going to have a lot more in the funds, I think. We now have $13 million. It's growing. Do you feel that from your pulse that people know?
That's a good thing too, that it's growing, because there's gonna be some things, big projects coming that I think we're gonna wanna have an interest in. We can someday discuss that.
Yeah.
But, there's, I think a lot of the people who work in the town and know the whole system, the average person doesn't. That's why I wanted to put something out with our taxes or some type of information like that. Maybe we get something on cam. Maybe we could even do a little show. You can go in, Brian. and they could. They're always looking for stuff like that, and you can be in
Good
give
old
some type of an
PTOs.
informative session
Right.
on it. But people, I don't think people pay attention until it's time for them to do something.
Right.
Yeah,
And then they want. Then they.
it's too late.
want
It's
to-
probably too late.
Yeah.
I do think obviously everyone on this committee has respective constituencies that we go back to who are very much aware of what, CPC is and does, but maybe they're, do you read much when it comes in your tax bill? I think you look at the number and probably say, great, move on, but.
No, I think it's, you gotta do something.
I wouldn't
Like,
mind,
you find
I
a
wouldn't mind
couple-
making the rounds,
And
right?
it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's also like, you gotta find people who have some sort of civic engagement, because you can't kind of just do it on your own. Like, you find the people in the Lions, the Booster Club, like, I think if we do outreach, that's, you go to established groups of people who are doing stuff together, and
At least inform them about what CPC is and what may or may not be eligible, or at least, what is eligible for CPC, and if they have stuff that works within the organization to discuss it in that sense.
Anyone know off the top of their head when the fall tax bill comes out? Is that a September 30?
We
Bill
talked
comes out in
about this
It
a
October.
needs to
bunch.
come out before the fall, though, because again, if somebody wants to be ready for a project, it's got to come out.
Dan, any idea when that next big tax mailing goes? I know we've talked about this a bunch in the past.
So, I think the next one is September.
I think you're right.
So, I could, when I talked to the treasurer about having something like directly on the tax bill where it talks about like this is the CPC money, they weren't as interested in that, but the newsletter that goes out with the tax bills, that's something we could definitely write an article for, or a little blurb soliciting input on projects or advertising, that we're interested in hearing about projects or whatever.
I think it can be very, very simple about, hey, here's the types of projects that we fund, and here's where you find more, and direct them to the town webpage. I don't think it needs to be much more than that.
August 1st?
Something I will add.
Yeah, August 1st is what the date is due from the website. So they must send a mailing out at least a couple weeks ahead of that. So we're
Okay.
probably like right on the edge.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
If in one of your last acts, Dan, if you could kind of investigate that for us, and we can at least try and get something very straightforward and to make sure that we're part of that.
Yep. Something I will add is this past year, we had that hearing in December. Originally, we were trying to have it in November, which would have allowed for some of that additional buffer time that you've been talking about. I think there was like a scheduling conflict or something, but pushing it to December did allow for a full month of outreach, and so things were being posted on social media. It was in the Eagle Tribune for 2 weeks in a row, and I believe CAM had a what do you call them? They had, an announcement up between shows and stuff like that, and so we did do some outreach, and who knows if that worked or not, but it did seem like the hearing went well, and something we've been doing internally is just when people come to us asking about certain improvements around town, we let them know that if CPC is an eligible option, that's something they can look into in the fall, and that's how Ted Kelly came in with the boat ramp, as he had asked about it sometime, I think, last summer.
Okay.
So we are directing people in this direction.
Well, if we're going to try and go ahead with any kind of notice of intent process, I mean, we'd probably want to move that hearing up into November, and to the extent that we can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we can put together a very simple notice of intent form that just highlights the easy things that we would expect to know, of roughly the project type, the category that it falls under, a 3 or 4 sentence narrative, and a ballpark price, knowing that they'll never be held to it. I think it's good to know if it's 100,000 or if it's $1 million. In terms of what we anticipate, and that gives us the opportunity to have direct outreach with those specific applicants to make sure that they're putting forward the best application possible, as far as I'm concerned. We can avoid some of the things that have happened elsewhere in the past. Everyone on board for that?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a
Yeah.
point, I thought this year here, even though we didn't spend a lot of money, I thought we made a lot of impact on the community with the projects that we're taking on. So I think it's been a great year.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree. All right, so big takeaways here is the notice of intent, and I think and again, we'll revisit this again next year, but for our committee application, our committee notice process, to make sure that we've got additional input for everyone. Okay. All right, if everyone else is good on this topic, I'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is, I guess we phrase it as leadership discussion, but it's really picking up where we left off at our October meeting, when we talked about really chair, vice chair, and bylaws, and all of those items. A lot of the discussion in October focused on, okay, let's get through town meeting and let's revisit at that time. So we've gotten through town meeting, it's time to revisit. And I'd like to get us to a point where we've at least got an idea of how we want to move forward as we head into the fall, so we can hit the ground running in September, is my thought behind it. So, a couple of things that were, and I'll throw these out on the table, that were part of our discussion from the fall, was establishment of bylaws, and establishment of either term limits for chair and vice chair, or rotating chair, vice chair. I think there was a lot of discussions around some of those items. So I'm going to kind of put that back on the table right now for, I guess, broader discussion to pick back up and see where everyone's thoughts are. I'm not sure many opinions have changed, but I wanted to see what everyone's thoughts were. Bill, I'll start with you. Put you on the spot.
I think we should, put together like a real simple set of bylaws. Just sort of outlining it. I think there's a lot of precedent. I think most committees have something written down already, so I think we could sort of modify what another group had done, just to say, like, this is what it's about, and this is how we do things. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift. And then, like, on leadership, I do think, I think having, like, regular elections, and then I'd be in favor of, I get where people are, like, you don't necessarily want to be chair. And I get, too, that it's a very different committee because, for most people on the committee, this is their secondary committee. Right. They're representing another committee, and, and some of them are pretty onerous, right? Like, if you're on the planning board and you're meeting, twice a month for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and then you're filling up another Thursday. I get it. But I do think it's good to, have the idea that the turnover is good so that you get the process down and you work on perfecting the process, and, having everyone be invested in sort of making sure the institution gets better, that we get a little better every year, and, how our process runs, and anybody, feels like, hey, we have a clearly enough defined process that if I got the nod as chair or vice chair, like, I would do it, and it wouldn't be just me out there in the wilderness kind of, doing 80% of the work of the committee, that we, have it established and have a good process in place, and we're vetting things, so it's, it's a, pretty comfortable thing.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on this topic in particular? I think everyone here has served on plenty of other committees. Actually, I haven't, but so my CPC is my limited experience in town.
Change is good, rotation of leadership is certainly.
Yeah, I mean, again, speaking from my perspective, I think I just completed my second year as chair. Now you kind of feel like you hit your stride at this point, right?
I was going to say, it almost takes a couple of years in position to be able to actually really be comfortable in most cases and do well at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not incredibly. I mean, again, speaking for myself personally, it's not incredibly high pressure. I mean, no life or death decisions here, but it is important, and it's we're stewards of taxpayer dollars. I think that's something that none of us here take lightly in that regard. But
I mean, I guess I'm not so much in favor of term limits. I guess the board as a whole, if we do regular elections, would be able to vet out something. I mean, obviously, we're not looking to have somebody in a position for 10 years, but I think if someone's doing an effective job, they're an effective leader, and they have the support of the committee, I don't see a reason to put term limits on unless, the board feels differently.
I tend to agree with that as well. The only thing that I would really think is most concerning isn't the chair position, greatest position around. It's the vice chair who should be making sure that they're ready to step in, not only in the chair's absence, but in the following year when the chair no longer wants to do it. And my experience has been in the finance committee, and we didn't have term limits there to the best of my knowledge, but it was sort of like unspoken that 2, maybe 3 terms as chair would be sufficient, but you always had that vice chair there being groomed to take over, to learn the steps, to learn the tricks.
Yeah, that's important.
So,
But I mean, you made a point. Look, on those boards, you're not coming from another board. Most of us are coming from another board.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm on 4 boards. So there's just no way.
Yeah.
There's no way I can take on that role. It would just be too much. I'd have to step off of other things. But those 4 things that I do bring a lot to this meeting, because I can tell you a lot what's going on in the community, and I can tell the community what we can do for them. So I can give you that. But even beyond that, even if I wasn't, I'm not the type of person who could sit in that chair. That's not who I am. And I wouldn't be comfortable with that. So I would never, so I don't like the rotation thing, because I would never want that person.
agree 100%.
Yeah,
No, I
I
mean,
would agree with
it's like voluntary, but I think sometimes people, end up you know, you end up in a spot and it's like, I've seen this happen too. It's kind of like, if you're the one who knows how to do it and you're doing it just fine, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's not that big a deal. You know, we can just sort of keep rolling along. And then it becomes a point like, is it impolite to say, is it your time up, you know? Or is it like, you know, or do you have to wait for someone to be like, hey, I'm out, like, no mas, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I mean, I think that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Or even like when I was on the Boost Club president, as long as you're doing it, nobody wants to step in. So you just-
Yeah.
you know, suddenly I want to move on.
You almost have to force the discussion and say,
and,
listen, yeah.
You know, and then you have trouble getting out, you
Yeah.
know, because you've been there. I was there 12 years, and you know, it was,
Yeah.
We just went through the same discussion on a business board that I'm on, and same thing, you know, someone takes it and everyone cheers and wishes them best luck and says it's gonna be the best 10 years of your life.
yeah.
So, well, I guess in the interest of maybe advancing this, I mean, again, we're not gonna necessarily decide everything tonight, for this, but I do wanna make sure that we're kind of ready to roll, for the fall. I guess, and how does everyone feel about at least establishing bylaws in terms of how we make this decision?
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, maybe we could ask some of the other CPA boards, maybe they have something like that set up.
Yeah.
and we can
I
go-
wouldn't want to create them from scratch, for
Yeah.
sure,
No.
yeah.
I mean, I mean, that's enough time. I could come up with like a, you know, at least the areas, right? Like, it's probably like 6 or 7 chapters of every, or whatever you call them, headings in every bylaw. So we could just come up with that and give like a variety. I could come up with one doc that has like a variety of approaches, like
Yep.
how to 3 different committees deal with, you know, the succession question or this question or that question, you know, and
Yeah.
put them together, and then at least we have something on a page that we could then start talking about.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
And then, you know, it would be good to do like the first thing on our meeting, because if we are gonna make changes, I always wanna do it at the beginning, because I don't like doing it in the middle of a session.
Absolutely, we want to get down to business, right? There's there's plenty of other stuff to do rather than, you know, any navel gazing in the committee in terms of, you know, what we're all about. So, all right, so I'll ask the unpopular question. Is anyone up for an August meeting to discuss solely bylaws? If Bill were to work on something, could we bang out one quick meeting in August and be ready to go in September?
I'm fine.
Yeah, and I was just thinking too, I don't know, you know, I know obviously we're all in different lines of work or not, but, you know, does it make sense to do
We're
a,
jealous, we say it out jealous.
you know, like in a meeting like that where we're, you know, obviously every meeting we have is a public meeting, but like, is it easier if we make it like a 8 o'clock meeting on a Friday or something? You know, like, I don't know from a scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, I think we get in August. I mean, listen, there's never an easy time for anyone. September is a
No.
really bad time
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everyone, I think. And I think it could be a lengthy meeting. It could be a brief meeting. But, you know, maybe if we can, you know, after this meeting, kind of all take our breath, pat ourselves in the back for a good year, get through July, maybe circulate a, you know, meeting invite when everyone has a clearer picture of their
Yeah.
schedule. I think if maybe for now, everyone could kind of keep, you know, that a regular time, the second Thursday in August as a placeholder, and let's revisit as we get closer. I do think it's important that we get really good attendance for it, because I think this is
Yeah,
going to
no, I
set
agree.
it's really going to set how this committee is going to operate when none of us are here anymore. So I think it's important that we, you know, that's not you know, a slim quorum making this decision. So if everyone's in agreement on that, we can kind of hold that date in August for the time being. I think it'd be the 11th of August, yeah. Watch me already have a conflict for that meeting right now.
So Brian, is that
yeah.
something we approve, or does that have to go through like the selectmen or like town meeting or something?
That's actually a great question that I don't know the answer to, but let me effort to find out. I would imagine it's probably, I would think the committee could,
Can we?
I would think the committee could make their own bylaws. Let me read, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Let me go back and read the existing CPC bylaw within the town, which probably states that we can make our own bylaws, but it's a good point, so.
I would also, some of that stuff is such gray. I don't know who the new legal town council will be. That's who I know we turn to relative to the finance committee, just asking her opinion on this stuff, so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's do that. Let's enjoy at least the first part of the summer off, and we'll come back and have a meeting solely focused on that, and that way, that'll be out of the way. We'll know how to handle the first meeting in September, and we'll be off and running for the new funding cycle, if everyone's okay with that. Okay?
Good.
All right. Anything else on this topic?
You don't have to go on vacation anyway, do you?
No,
No, you can't. You're putting clay over at the at Grogan's Mound.
not during baseball season.
Okay, great. So next up, approval of the May 12th, 2022 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Any objection to
I don't think I can do it, 'cause I'm,
Were you not at the meeting?
I was there.
Of course you can. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining because I wrote that.
You were at there. Okay,
As do
excellent.
I.
Excellent. Okay. 1, 2, 3,
Can't.
4.
Yeah, John,
Yeah, John, did you vote on that?
I can't hear him.
We can't hear you if you did.
I did.
Okay, excellent. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Raise your
I
hand.
have a band behind me. He's making too much noise.
No worries. No worries. That makes us a super quorum. So, all right. Can I get another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Enjoy the summer, folks. Thank you all for a great year.
Okay.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay.
Oh,
I
oh,
know.
thank you, Kim. Dan, I almost forgot. This was your last meeting, wasn't it?
This was my last meeting.
I can't believe I forgot to
Gotta
say
miss
it.
ya.
Thank you very, very, very much for everything you've done for us the last couple of years. You've certainly made my world easier, and you've been a, kind of a behind-the-scenes partner that's really made this committee run, and I can't thank you enough. What are you doing next?
Still interviewing, but sticking in Seattle, interviewing for a lot of similar assistant level planner positions, but looking at some more specific sort of green infrastructure parks planning ones. Was a finalist for one of those, so fingers crossed. But
If you ever need a reference,
luck.
please send that my way. All right.
yep,
Excellent.
will do. It's been a blast. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Dan.
When do we know?
Have a nice
When do we know who's replacing you?
So I think they're accepting applications through the end of the month, and they're still reviewing them. If they don't have somebody by the end of the month, I'm gonna stick around until they do. But I don't think there's going to be like a huge lapse. Like there should be somebody by the fall.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, Dan. Thank you very much, and best of luck.
Yep. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.